First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming. It means a lot to me, and I know that Bert's probably watching. You better be. How do you say goodbye to someone you've shared the greater part of your life with? You don't. You keep him alive in your heart and your mind. You share your memories of them with others, and they share their feelings about him. Bert was the love of my life. We had 39 joyous years together. Bert gave his love to all of us. He embraced my children and our grandchildren. Bert enhanced all of our lives. He was sweet, empathetic, understanding, steadfast, stuck with me, and full of love. And he was funny. That was that Carolyn Miller. That was a Bert thing. Even in his last days, he told us how happy his life had been because of all of us. Each of us has special and different memories of being with him. For me, he was a gift from God. He came into my life in an interesting way, which is quite a story. He lived up to all his promises and his vows of marriage every single day. How do I say goodbye? I don't. I won't. I will love him and carry the great love he shared with me until the last star falls from the sky. I pray he's there waiting for me when my days are done. Bert was one of our family's greatest gifts. To know and to love him was wonderful every day. I could go on forever sharing about all the years of happiness and fun that we had. Yes, our family experienced some growing pains that occur in all families, but that just taught us how strong our love was. He was the love of my life, and his love flowed to our entire family and friends. Most of you are here and you know and you love him. Bert leaves with us beautiful memories, happy times, laughter, and tears. His last words were, "Have a happy day." That's on the bench. I wake every morning telling him those words. I invite you to share your thoughts and stories and memories of the man we knew. Though the memories shared today maybe will be just a small glimpse of the man who came to share his life with us, each of us has a different story to tell. I'm so happy you all came and joined in for this celebration. And thank you.
When I, like normal, yes. I'm quick. No complaints, though. So when I first when I first met Bert, I didn't like him. And actually, it wasn't that I didn't like Bert, I just didn't like the situation. Mom dating somebody, right? But he broke me down eventually. I think what was the big change for me that made me look at him different was the day that they got married. It may have been 4 years later, but it took me 4 years. That's what happens. Again, it wasn't Bert. I mean, he was a nerd, you know, but I'm a nerd, so. No, it was the day they got married, and that's when it really kind of sunk in, because when he was trying to talk and say his vows, he couldn't because he kept crying and breaking down. And that was when I realized how much he actually loved my mom. And so I think that was the breaking point for me. Breaking point's right now. The breaking point for me was realizing, okay, he's a good guy, and he loves my mom for loving her. So anyway, next.
I could just say one thing about this. The breaking down, we wrote our own vows, and I said my vows, and Andrea knows. She was there. She was a bridesmaid. It's my little girl. Anyway, he said, when he started his vows, he went, "Carolyn." And he broke down, and I'm thinking, he's having a heart attack. Something's happening here. Anyway, so I just hugged him, and it was all over.
That's really true. Jim asked me to go with him to look at a house. So I did, and I met Carolyn in April of 1991. And then a few years later, about 3 or 4, we met Bert. And little did we know that we would be best friends. But one time I remember in particular, because Bert and I were the straight men to Jim and Carolyn, because wherever we went, Jim and Carolyn would banter with the waitress, the waiter, wherever it was, and Bert and I would be wanting to crawl under the table like, who are these people we're with? And they would just carry on, and we would be the straight men. But one time in particular I remember that was so hysterical that to this day I could bust up laughing. We went to Italy 2 years in a row, and the second year we rented a car. And we were in the parking lot with this car, and Bert was driving, and Bert did not know what all the details were to the car. Jim was sitting up front, and Carolyn and I were in the back, and the windshield wipers were going, the horn was honking, there were all these things going off, and we didn't budge. We weren't going anywhere. And I was laughing so hard, I told Carolyn, I'm going to wet myself if I don't stop. This was hysterical. And Jim is sitting there absolutely frozen in fear because not knowing what was going to happen. But we did eventually get going. Bert figured it out, and we got going. And it turned out that particular time there was a strike in Italy, and none of the toll roads were working. So we were able to just slide through all the tolls and not have to pay a dime. But to this day, I'll never forget Bert trying to drive that car, and he didn't know where everything was, but he wasn't going to give up, and he wasn't going to admit that he didn't know how to do it. So he was hysterical. And I have never laughed so hard in my entire life, and those are memories that I will treasure forever. Well, that was the other thing. It was pouring down rain every place we went, including Cannes, including Nice. It was pouring down rain. It was like a hurricane. And he was driving, and he did a really good job. But like I say, Jim sat there, white knuckled the entire way, absolutely panicked that there was going to be a car crash. So anyway, Carolyn, he was a treasure. And Bert and I had many discussions about HP and Xilinx at the time and stock. And he and I decided in the late 90s that it was smart to buy the Apple stock when it was like $14 a share. He was smart. He bought quite a large amount and held on to it. I bought 100 shares and panicked when it got to 60, and I sold it. And I have kicked myself ever since. Yep. Okay, who's next?
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bert's brother. We are 17 months apart, so... Oh, I'm sorry. We were 17 months apart, so as we grew up, we were very close. And I've written some recollections of his youth, and hopefully I can get through this without crying, because I'm the brother that wears his emotions on his sleeve. Sorry. We all have wonderful recollections of Bert, with his fine character, his brilliant, inquisitive mind, his strong work ethic, his ingenuity, his physical strength, his sporting accomplishments, his love of the outdoors, his generosity, his kindness, his honesty, and his offbeat sense of humor. I think a lot of you have felt that. I would like to share with you some of the recollections of his younger days and how he became the man we all know and love. I hope you don't mind me reading this. I'm doing my best. To begin, our father was an immigrant from northern Italy who came to USA as a small child with his parents. And our mother was born in Burbank, California, but her parents were immigrants from northern Italy. Our Italian heritage influenced our upbringing and was very important to Bert as well as the rest of us, but especially him. I'm going to tell a little story that I don't know personally, but our parents told it to us off and on. When they were first married, they lived in a little duplex apartment in one part of Burbank. And Bert was a rambunctious little boy. And one day, our grandmother, who lived in Pennsylvania, came to visit us. And I was just a little baby at the time, and Bert was either 2 or 3. And our mother had a little trouble keeping control of Bert, so somewhere along the line she fixed him with a harness and had a leather strap she would hold on to him when she went to the market. Well, this particular day that our grandmother came to visit, she'd never been to see my parents. My mother was in the house with me, and she had Bert outside tethered to a tree. So our grandmother arrives kind of unannounced, and she finds this little boy tied to the tree. So she unties him, and I got to read this part. Okay, I'm almost here. So our grandmother went in to see our mother, and the newly freed Bert took off, leaving the yard and heading to who knows where. Shortly thereafter, our panicked mother and horrified grandmother went on foot searching for this runaway little guy. They found him later several blocks up Glen Oaks Boulevard, which was the main road through Burbank. This tells you that Bert definitely had a mind of his own from an early age and was not one that could be held back easily. And our mother thinks later, she told us that he was on his way up this road that led to our other grandparents' house 5 miles away. So not only was he had a mind of his own, I think he knew where he was going. Just to give you a little more background of how we grew up, our parents moved from that apartment to a house in our grandfather's vineyard. Our mother's father had this nice ranch in Burbank. There were farm buildings, draft horses, fruit orchards. So it was kind of an idyllic life for us there, growing up in the country. Of course, we had chores to do. Bert helped in the harvest sometimes in a little bit of a way. Cleaned the chicken coops. So I developed this ability to work well. I'm kind of drifting here. Bert and I were fortunate enough to be able to hike beyond our grandparents' vineyards up into the mountains. Our fathers taught us how to fire firearms and how to be safe with them, and Bert was given a rifle at 8 years old, so he was really an outdoorsman. I'm going to drift down here. Most of you know or may know that Bert became an Eagle Scout. And that was really an important honor, and it's something that goes with you all of your life. But I believe Bert was more proud of his achievements as a patrol leader. And I don't know if many of you know about the scouting situation. There's groups of boys and patrols. Well, anyway, I'm going to have to read this. Every spring, there was a competition of these scout patrols. There may have been 40 of them or so. And this competition was in various scouting disciplines: tent making, tying knots, making a fire without matches. Anyway, the first time our patrol that was led by Bert went there, we got third. And that was pretty good, but it wasn't good enough for Bert. So the whole next year, every week we worked on these different techniques, and I'll be darned, the next year we got first place. And I think that was important to Bert, and it shows the kind of man he was, and he instilled in us other boys how to be diligent and stick with the task and be successful. Yes, now that you mention it. And he would develop techniques to do it faster. You can just tie a knot, but he would work on it, how you can do it fast. Anyway, it was a big deal, and we were very successful at it. I'm not going to ramble on. Bert was a wonderful brother, a great companion, a kind man, a generous man. I love him dearly, as I'm sure most of you do. And someday, I hope to see him again in heaven. Thank you.
I'm Nathan. I'm sure most of you know. That's my mom. Yeah, applause, please. Grambo was in my life pretty much my entire life. I mean, he was there the day I was born, and he's always been a part of my life in some way. So I've spent several months just kind of thinking what I wanted to share. And I think what I remember most about Grambo is that he was always there for me. You could always count on him to be there with a smile, to say, keep up the hard work, I'm proud of you. And that really means a lot to me. Just having that kind of person there to say that is really important. I hope everyone has had similar experiences with him with that. Sorry. There were a couple things that I wanted to share as well that I was kind of remembering back. When I was a lot younger, still living in Cupertino, I used to go over to their house a lot and do little kits with them, and Nana would bring us sandwiches and chips while we were working on whatever we were doing. This one in particular that he was really focused on was this crystal radio set. That he no matter what, he kept trying to get it to work. I would always come over and we'd work on it, and we'd always have such a hard time getting it to actually get a signal. And every time I would see him after, he'd always say, I've almost got this working. And then I remember one day, he's like, all right, I think we need to go a little bit higher out of all the signals. And so I don't know exactly where the place was, but it was by like these mines in Cupertino. Do you know what that? It's like a mountain or something. Yeah, it's something like that. But at that young age, I remember I spent a lot of time with him, but there was still a part of me that was kind of scared of him, because he would always grab me, and it was always really rough, and it kind of scared me as a kid. I guess just to wrap it up, I mean, Grambo was a very important part of my life. He was always there, and I definitely do miss him a lot. So.
Hello, I'm Kelsey, one of the many grandchildren. I became part of this family when I was 6 years old. Without any hesitation, Grambo embraced me as one of his own. He opened his arms and heart to everyone and greeted us by saying, hello to all of you beautiful people. Truly, he was one of a kind, tender-hearted, and believed in doing the right thing every time. He was the kind of man who lit up a room by being driven, loving, selfless, brilliant, dependable, and most of all, our Grambo. For my 7th birthday, I had a party in Nana and Grambo's backyard. All my friends and family were there celebrating and playing. One of the most memorable gifts I got that day was from Grambo. Both Haley and Chelsea, my sisters, had these stools that turned into chairs with their names on it. I always thought they were so cool and so special. That year, I got my very own with my name on it. The amount of joy that filled my heart that day is unmeasurable. I felt so loved and included. Grambo loved to talk about and ask what we'd be up to in our lives as we got older, always wanting to encourage us to pursue our dreams and reach for the stars. When I went to cosmetology school, he was one of the biggest cheerleaders for me, constantly expressing how proud he was of me. He always had the best stories to share and so many life experiences that would light up his face to talk about. I'm so grateful I got the joys of knowing such an inspirational man that I was lucky enough to call Grambo. Thank you for loving me all these years.
Thank you. Can you hear me? So you don't know me, but Bert was my boyfriend. Carolyn knows. Carolyn knows. I am the neighbor. I'm Barb. And Bert was my boyfriend. And when I first met him, I said, Bert, we're thinking of going to Hawaii. And he said, Barb, I had a pacemaker, I had a stroke, I have 2 broken hips. Go to Hawaii. And what was lovely about Bert was he said this every single time we got together for a glass of wine. Did you know he drank wine? He would say the same thing. I love Carolyn Miller. And he would say, just be Carolyn Miller. And he would talk about Mount Hebo. Any of you heard about Mount Hebo? And he would talk about the great toilet bowl revelation. Have you heard about that? When he realized his PhD at Stanford, that there was an issue and he would actually get his PhD. Did you know that? Guys, this man was incredible. He was the best neighbor. You guys were the best neighbors ever. And when he started to lose his memory, he would tell me more and more. And I got all the details of Mount Hebo. And when he was in the Air Force, and when he went to Stanford, and how he figured out all of those patents at HP, because little details would come back. And one of the things I loved about Bert was I would always, hey, you want to go get some ice cream? You betcha, right? He was amazing, amazing person. He was generous in his heart and generous with his love. And he talked about all of you all the time. And come on, how many of you can forget the story of being in the Rose Bowl and him pulling the pants down on that other guy? This man was incredible. And I just want to thank you, Carolyn, for being so gracious with us and for bringing Bert into our lives. Because, as he always said, just be Carolyn Miller.
Thanks, Bob.
As I think back on my relationship with Bert and what Bert means to me in my life, I feel gratitude. I had expected to have feelings of sadness, aching, and loss, which I do from time to time, and those feelings do come in waves, but the most predominant feeling I have is gratitude. I'm grateful for him being in my life, for what he has shown me and what he has taught me. Bert had a special way of allowing people to be who they are without judgment and without pushing them. I'm the youngest of all the children, so I was still in high school and living with my mom when they were dating. My dad had moved to North Carolina, so I wasn't eager to get to know another man as I still had a lot of hurt. When Bert would come around the house, he would always say hello to me. Sometimes I would just say hi with teenage attitude, roll my eyes, and leave the room. He never gave me a hard time or chastised me for being rude or unpleasant. He didn't have any expectations around how I should behave or what I had to say. This allowed me to come around when I was ready to and trust him and come to know him and love him. And I've always been thankful for that. Since Bert was active and loved the outdoors, he would take me and my mom skiing. He and I even went alone a few times. We'd get up around 5:30 in the morning and drive up to Dodge Ridge. I remember he would play the Kingston Trio in the car on the way. And I thought the song, The Tijuana Jail, was funny. You guys know that one? Just set my bail to the Tijuana Jail. Bert helped me with my algebra homework and was so patient with me. I would get frustrated to tears, not understanding the concepts. He had a way of helping me slow down and go through the problems one step at a time. I know I got better at math because of Bert helping me relax so I could take my time and understand. He never raised his voice or got frustrated with me. If one method didn't work, he would try something else until I finally got it. I recently helped my daughter Sarah file her taxes this year for the first time. As I taught Sarah, it brought up memories of sitting down at the kitchen table to do my taxes when I was young. Bert was there to help me out, especially with the math part. His guidance helped make a tedious task easier for me, and that's something I hadn't realized until this year. Bert also taught me the power of tenacity. When I was T-boned in my 77 Camaro by a woman who cut me off at a left turn in front of me, Bert was the one who got on the phone with the insurance company and argued with them that they needed to fix my car. They wanted to total it out since the Blue Book value was less than the cost of the repairs. I don't know how he did it, but I know that my car got fixed and I drove that car for 7 more years. Totaling it out wouldn't have allowed me enough money to buy another car, so he fought for me to be able to get the body damage fixed. During the 1989 earthquake, the Loma Prieta one, Bert and I both had jobs in Palo Alto. We ended up arriving home almost at the same time. As I pulled into the street in front of the house, Bert had just pulled into the driveway. My mom heard us and came out the front door to greet us. He immediately let my mom fall apart in his arms. You see, my mom was a very strong person. She needed a strong man to allow her to break down when she needed to. He was a safe place without judgment. I'm not sorry. I know what. When I tore my ACL playing in a soccer tournament, he also fought with the insurance company to cover the physician assistant and to get other bills covered. He and my mom drove with me to all the surgical appointments and the 2 surgeries, even though they were in San Francisco. As I look back on my life since I was 15 years old, I always thought Bert was a background character, but really he was the supportive, loving observer. He was there for all of the big things, graduating from high school, promotions at work, graduating from junior college, getting accepted to UC Davis, playing fast pitch softball in college, graduating from UC Davis, getting my MBA, my real estate broker license. He even walked me down the aisle when I got married. I once told him, I don't feel comfortable calling you dad because I already have a dad. But just know when I'm calling you Bert, that's my word of affection for you. I'm not just calling you by your name. I really am calling you my dad. He wasn't overly expressive with me because I think he knew that I'm not comfortable with that. He and I had more of a matter-of-fact relationship. When I asked him to walk me down the aisle at my wedding, without hesitation, he answered, yes. My mom was the one who was like, wait a minute, what about your dad? And Bert interjected, Carolyn, look, she asked me and she wants me to do it. She's my daughter and I'm going to walk her down the aisle. I think my mom really wanted to make sure I didn't regret not having my bio dad walk me down the aisle, but my mind was made up. He was the one who had been there for me through all the milestones, and when I told him I wanted him, he took his place by my side and was there to support me. He was there when my son Nathan was born. When I called my mom to tell her Nathan was going to be born 9 weeks premature, she brought Bert with her to the hospital into the delivery room. Since his children were adopted, he had never seen a baby born before. I don't know if my mom asked him to be there or if he said he wanted to. He said he wanted to? Okay, but I'm so glad to this day that I let him stay in the room. He sat respectfully off to the side while Nathan was being born and was one of the first people to see Nathan. He even came to visit Nathan in the NICU. 6 days after Nathan came home from the hospital at about 7 weeks old, we were having dinner with my mom and Bert. Nathan stopped breathing and Bert helped me perform CPR. His calmness in the face of a crisis is something I'll always appreciate. When Nathan finally started breathing again, Bert ran out into the street to flag down the fire truck and brought the first responders into the house. He also was the one to tell me that Nathan needed me and that I should stay home with him for a year. They helped us make ends meet during the first year when I was home with Nathan, and I'll always appreciate that I didn't have to go back to a stressful tech job. I'm so thankful for Grandpa's role in my children's lives, and especially his relationship with Nathan. The two of them are so similar in their scholastic achievements, and they have spent many hours together building Legos and machines and electronics. Grandpa was also so wonderful with Sarah. When Sarah was about 6 months old, my mom and I attended a RE/MAX convention in Texas. We brought baby Sarah with us. During the business meetings, Bert wandered around the convention center, pushing Sarah in the stroller. Then he would meet us outside of the conference rooms after our meetings ended. He even took my mom, me, and Sarah out to a nice dinner where baby Sarah slept on my lap. He was so sweet with her and didn't mind at all watching her. He said she was good as gold and slept nicely while we attended our meetings. Taking care of an infant can be stressful, but he was calm and just fine with baby Sarah, and he never made me feel like it was a burden or an inconvenience. In fact, all the years I've known Bert, I've only seen him lose his temper twice. One time, when I was young and still living at home, he ran an errand and was gone for a very long time. This was in the days before everyone had cell phones, so we were kind of worried about why he was gone so long. When he finally walked in the garage door, my mother asked, "Where have you been?" And in a very frustrated and elevated voice, he said, "I'm pissed off." apparently he had tried to get spark plugs for his car and had gotten the runaround from the parts store. My mom and I started laughing because it was so out of character for him to blow up like that. It became a running joke that he might get upset, like with the spark plugs, or oh my gosh, it's like spark plugs all over again, or please don't let it be like the spark plugs. Poor guy was upset, and here we were laughing at him. The second time I saw him lose his temper was directed towards my ex-husband, that he was not treating me right. When my marriage was crumbling, Bert was my champion. He and Mom would set up meetings, and he would sit down with my ex to try to encourage him to get a job. My ex just didn't understand why he needed to work and just wasn't hearing any of it. Bert finally said, "You're killing her, Gil." Which my ex used to repeat back to me, and I was like, "You are, dude." Because my parents saw how stressed out I was trying to support the family, I felt so relieved that they saw how hard I was working, and he was acknowledging that my ex's behavior was harming my health. So since my ex wasn't the man husband and the father that I needed, Bert and my mom stepped in and helped me buy a house here in Idaho. That was the push that allowed me to get away from the expensive, stressful, and unhealthy quality of life I was living in the Bay Area. Without Bert's encouragement and support, I would not be living the life I'm living now. And I'm so thankful to him and my mom for supporting me and helping me break out of an unhealthy relationship and live a healthier life. When I was getting divorced, he never criticized or had anything bad to say. Besides maybe one time he said how he really felt about my ex, he remained positive. He reminded me how well I had done with my career. He praised my accomplishments and that I was doing a great job raising my kids. He would say, "Keep up the good work, Nikki." And when I would leave after a visit, he would say things like, "I'm proud of you. You're doing a great job. God bless you, Nikki." I can still hear his voice in my head saying those words of love and encouragement. That Thursday, January 5th, when the doctors told him he had cancer, he understood what his fate was to be. He said that he didn't want to go, but that it seemed that the man upstairs had a different plan. He said that he was 86 years old and that this was no time for heroics and drastic measures. He let out one brief emotional cry and just as quickly stopped and put on a brave face. He said that it seemed that his path was heading towards the end and that he would need to take that path. He bravely accepted his fate, but it became very important to him that he say some words to my mother. I realize now that I learned one final lesson from Bert, what it means to love and be loved so deeply. He said, "Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for being my wife and for the life we had. God bless you, Carolyn." He said it 3 times because with his dementia, he would get it into his head that he had to say something important, and he meant to say it and get that message across. When it was time for us to leave the hospital after that afternoon, he said, "Come give me a goodbye kiss." And again, he said it 3 times and got 3 goodbye kisses. The final week spent at his bedside at home as his family held vigil, we were all able to tell him we loved him. And he said, "I love all you guys." He smiled when he could until those few final days when he mostly slept. As I looked around the room and saw it filled with everyone who loved him most, his wife, his brother and sister, his daughter, his stepchildren, their spouses, and his grandchildren, I was able to see what a blessed life he led and the loving impact he had on all of us. I hope to someday be equally as blessed to have my loved ones surrounding my bedside when my time comes. If he were here today, he would say, "Hello, all you beautiful people. Thank you for being here with us today. God bless you all."
So I'm gonna read because too many emotions. Too many emotions. Is that better? Yep. Read it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to read it. Thank you. Sisters are amazing. Thank you.
No one cares, you'll have to memorize it.
Thank you. I have all the permissions. I'm so grateful. I am Andrea Bitter. There is most of my family on this side. We aren't separated on purpose. It just kind of happened that way. But anyway, so I'm Bert's daughter via adoption. And
I adopted her too.
yeah, and we're gonna get to that. Some good stuff. I tried to condense a whole lifetime into just a few pages. I hope I do the man justice, because he definitely gave us all a better life. So here we go. Today I'd like to share not a history of Bert, I'm gonna cry, his accomplishments, or how he may have changed the world through his ingenuity. Today I'd like to share with you my perspectives about your Bert, your Grambo, and my dad. We have all had our interactions with Bert, though those who have been blessed through them. This is hard. We have all had our interactions with Bert, and through those we have all been blessed to learn about him, and I would venture to say we also learned about ourselves. Bert was formidable, with all his early rantings about conspiracies of the rich, to his political views, repeated self-histories, to his booming voice and quick temper. Bert shared his opinion with such passion that if you didn't know him better, you might get the impression that you had been trapped into a great debate. But the truth is, Bert just liked to talk. Sadly, I grew up ignoring his tirades, speeches, and debates. As a prideful teenager and arrogant young adult, I didn't understand that my time with him was fleeting. Then as an adult, the distance of living on opposite coasts, me in Massachusetts with my little growing family, and he here with his growing family. I lost my place, kept us apart, and life took precedent. I didn't learn to appreciate his wisdom until his mind began to silently retreat and his stories began to disappear. So Barb, please write those down. Even though I can't recount verbatim Bert's stories, I will do best to share with you my version and my story of my dad. While Bert was able to debate with such passion and force, I always knew that my dad would never be a great orator. He was never able to bring the same verbose energy while reading aloud. I'm like fogging up here. By reading aloud, his monotone quality quickly deterred even the most eager listener, no matter what the subject. Yeah. It was bad. It was really bad. None at all. However, that never deterred me from asking him. On Sunday mornings, it was his ritual to sit in his big, comfy swivel chair and read the newspaper. After my chores were done, I would quietly come up and stare at him with big, hopeful eyes until he noticed me. Each time he would chuckle and ask if I wanted to sit on his lap, and eagerly I would climb up. He always seemed to read through sections quickly, and suddenly he would land on a page with Sunday comics, and then say, "Should I read?" Wait, I'm losing it. That's the good part. After agreeing, I would nestle down into his lap with my head on his chest and listen to the soothing vibration of his deep voice. Once, I asked him if he could give the characters different voices. When he tried, he only got louder. But the monotone quality to his voice never changed. Dad was fiercely tenacious. He would never give up on a challenge. We had this old-timey standing radio. It required rewiring and some old large transistor bulbs. And on the weekend, when all chores were done, he would go out into the garage and turn on a smaller transistor radio to listen to whatever football game was playing. And he would begin to work on his project. This lasted for months, and then one day, he just stopped, and he moved on to another project. Over time, my negative teenage attitude seemed to be coming to a peak, and I was distancing myself. I think he wanted to do what he could to maintain our close relationship, so he asked me if there was a project or something that we could do together. I knew he loved that radio. I was really touched by this and asked him if we could work on that together. I remember his face lighting up as he began to make plans for the following week for us to complete the abandoned project. We only worked on it for 2 Saturdays before we found success and got reception. I was so happy to see how proud he was, and that was the end of my working with my dad. I was on to better, what I thought were more important things. Dad loved his family and was honest to a fault. One afternoon, I was arriving home from school, and he was in the driveway with 2 very impressive-looking men. Dad introduced me and then quickly dismissed me as they needed to finish their conversation. At dinner, I asked him what they wanted. He told me they were headhunters, men who were looking to recruit Dad for a special job. As I inquired more about the job, Dad finally told me that they would pay him a lot more money. And as a teenage girl, I thought that sounded pretty good. But then he said it would require him to be gone away from home, and he didn't want to leave his family. Now that I'm too many years older than I want to admit, I realize that the headhunters, or recruiters as they were known then, or as they're known now, do things a little differently. And as I look back on the experience, I can see that there might have been a little more to what he was saying. And I also like to imagine that something more nefarious was happening. So maybe his conspiracy theories might have held some truth. Or maybe not. Years later, he was promoted within HP and asked to do a touring lecture series about the history of Silicon Valley. It also required him to continually report to the higher-ups in the company. He tried the position, but in a short while gave up. When I pressed him about it, Dad told me that he didn't like to embellish or manipulate data to make the company seem better. He had no intention of putting himself in a position to challenge his integrity. He also said he didn't like public speaking. Given his humble spirit, I believe he knew the monotone style of delivery left little to be desired. But out of those and other experiences, I knew his priority was his family. He didn't want to be in a position where his family or integrity would be compromised. Dad was loyal and loved fully. When his marriage failed with Linda, his first wife, he was sad. Yet even though she proved herself to be a difficult person, it became obvious that they were not a match. But he never spoke ill of her. He always referred to her in kind and respectful ways. Then when he met Mom, some of you know her as Nana or Carolyn, the beautiful lady in black, he met his match. He knew it from the beginning and spent the rest of his life devoted to her. And even though she and I had difficult beginnings, his only wish for us was to get along. And I can happily say that, at least from my point of view, she became the mother that I've always wanted. She embodies the spirit of bold honesty that Dad had, as well as the generosity and compassion that he possessed. Lastly, I'd like to focus on the gifts that my dad left me. Dad gave me the gift of kindness. In the Bible, sorry, I'm a little religious here. In the Bible, Matthew chapter 5, we read, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Because of him, I try daily to embody that trait, to honor both my dad and my Heavenly Father. Dad gave me the gift of honesty and integrity. And in the book of Job, we learn of a man who was challenged and tested in every aspect of his life, yet Job's response to this is found in chapter 27. "Till I die, I will not remove mine integrity from me." It is my hope that I can offer the same in my life. My dad may have been a little old-fashioned and thought women should be held to a higher standard than men. Don't get me wrong, he always knew women could and should do anything they desired. He often told Mom, "Fly, be free." But he valued the qualities of virtue. Proverbs tells us that the price of a virtuous woman is far above rubies. I hope I can live up to the talents and potential that he saw in me, while at the same time remaining virtuous and kind. There are many more things I can say about my father, but I have taken up enough time. So I would like to end by telling you about the last gift my father gave me. The gift of family. Being adopted, I always felt like I was a bit of an outsider. I thought I never really fit in, yet somehow I never saw my dad as anything other than my dad. But I was still on my own. My younger brother suffers from mental health issues and has separated himself from us. And my older brother passed away about 20 years ago. Yet over the years, things have slowly changed. Suddenly, Nana, Carolyn, became my mom and Nana to my children. I now have a younger sister who is so strong and very wise, Nikki. And I have two brothers, Jeff and Greg. I married the other Greg, but this is Greg, whom I have grown to love and trust. Dad instilled virtues in me that are necessary to living a good life. I have learned to love fully, give my time and my energy to my children, and to value and cherish my own husband. I have learned to be kind. In his last audible words of advice to the world, he said, "Have a happy day." So to my dad, I say thank you for helping me become the woman I am today. And to all of you, I say, God bless you. Have a happy day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Keaton. For all of you who don't know, I am Diane's son and the loud one over there, also known as Hey You, or Jeff if you prefer. Where I began, Grambo was always just a big influence for me. Going through high school, I did a lot of sports, and being with Grambo nearby, he was always trying to come to every sporting event that he could and teaching me things that he learned from his days back playing sports. Him and I really connected. When I would play football, he would show me some tricks and how to really give him the forearm shuffle, as he called it, and knock some guys down. Grambo was definitely somebody I'm going to miss for the rest of my life, and someone I would admire. He always was so kind to everybody. I never saw him upset, even if there was spark plugs involved. But I'm just grateful I got to know him for the man he was, and grateful to call him my Grambo.
I'm logged in. I'm also going to read. So, well, half the time. It's a two-part deal. So, memories first. It's funny to hear the monotone stories, Grambo reading monotone, because it's actually one of my favorite Grambo memories. There was one book that I loved as a child called Bartholomew and the Oobleck. It's a very obscure, weird, kind of disturbing Dr. Seuss creation. And Grambo was the only one who I wanted to read that book because his monotone was perfect. It's about this boy who had to save his kingdom from this ominous green slime. And Grambo's, deep monotone was very great for ominous green slime stories. So I had him read this book to me over and over and over again. And no matter how many times I asked him to read it in a row, he would do it. And I would sit there with him on his little tan chair where he would read his newspapers and crawl up into his lap and he'd read it in his monotone. And it always just made it extra animated to me. So even though he never did the different character voices for Bartholomew and the Oobleck, it worked. And I still love that story to this day because I can hear Grambo reading it in my mind. That's one of my favorite Grambo memories. The other one is short and sweet, but he's always known that I'm a shrimp person. I love shrimp, and he would go out of his way whenever I'd come over for dinner, especially as I got older and was going to college and wasn't around as often. He would always make his famous shrimp Alfredo from scratch, just for me. Whenever he knew I was coming over, that always made me feel very special. So, on to the written part. when someone dies, we mourn their loss. We miss their presence, and we feel the emptiness and the vacancy in our hearts now that they're gone. But what we don't often think about is what our loved ones take with them when they go. And thinking about Grambo, the truth of it is, it isn't just that he's gone. It's also that the part of us that only he could bring out feels like it's gone too. So, as we remember him, I want to invite you to take a moment and remember, in his honor, the part of you that he brought out. And I want you to think about the way that he made you feel and the qualities of yourself that he elicited, the best of yourself that only he could see. I know for me, part of it was the love of academics. He would always ask me every time I saw him, especially as the dementia kicked in, "Are you still in school?" But the thing is, the answer was always yes. Because like Rambo, I'm a glutton for punishment in the world of academia. And I just keep collecting degrees like he did. And so I think about that when I think about him. And if you remember these parts of you that only Grambo can bring out, you'll honor him. So embody this part of you every day with intention. And if you do, he'll keep living on within you, always a part of you, and forever helping you to be the person that he always believed in.
All right, the Grambo story.
Mike closer.
We'll get to that one in a minute.
Mike closer. Mike closer.
What, are you saying I don't have an outside voice without a freaking microphone? There's a couple other stories about Grambo that some may or may not know. So it actually wasn't the Rose Bowl where the pants came down. It was actually rugby, but same time frame, same thing. Picture of it on the Sports Illustrated. He was never big enough to actually be first string on the football team, but he did go to the Rose Bowl with UCLA. And I remember him telling me a story about when they were looking at the film. And back then it wasn't film and look, we're looking at it 3 seconds later. It was a week or two before they get him back. And he executes this perfect block and takes this guy out and he's running. And the coach says, "Look at that. That is perfect, perfectly executed." "Oh shit, it's Frescura." He wasn't big enough for any of that. But he did get to the Rose Bowl. And then went in the Air Force at Mount Hebo, which everybody's heard about. Some way more than others. Well, it depends on what stage of life where that is, because for a while it was right over there. You could see it from here. You know, obviously it's over in Oregon. But he requested to have the night shift while he was there, which nobody else wanted. And of course, the commander of the base said, "You got it. Why would you want that?" "Well, okay, have it." So he took the night shift, which enabled him to go to Oregon State.
Go Beavs.
The what?
Go Beavs.
Yeah, go Beavs. Yeah. Last time I checked, the Broncos do that, didn't they? So he ended up getting his master's degree at Oregon State. Fast forward 40 years, Chelsea goes to Oregon State.
Well, she's done now.
Yes, she's done now, but it's more than 40 years at this point. Silence, frown.
Okay.
After Oregon State and was out of the Air Force, he ended up going to work for Fairchild and then eventually recruited out with HP, where he used to get in quite a few heated debates apparently with Shockley, who, those of you who don't know, and transistors have been brought up many times in radios, Shockley invented the transistors. Two of them used to go back and forth. And then he was on the development team for the LED, or as he used to always say, the light-emitting diode, which if anyone wants to see the world's largest light-emitting diode, it's out in the garage somewhere. It's this huge thing, nothing like what you would see today. So life would be very different without that technology. Then HP put him through Stanford, where he did get his PhD. I came along much later when he and Mom met. I older than the rest of everybody other than Bob, who's no longer with us. Didn't really have a dad-son relationship with him. We were much more friends and go off and do fishing and things like that. You know, at some point in time, Mom asked me, what do you think of this guy? And, well, he makes you happy, so what are you worried about? Just go with it. You know, everyone else says that too. Well, nobody else says that. No, nobody else says that. So, anyways. He was there when I needed him, which, the way I am, those of you that know me, even if I need you, you're not going to know I need you. But he somehow did. Always did. So, we used to go fishing, not nearly as often as it would have been like, but we'd go out and spend time together doing things like that. At that point in time, my dad was on the East Coast. My grandpa was gone, who I used to play golf with constantly. That's a whole different story. But Bert always had an ear if I needed an ear or a second opinion or just something to bounce off of for him to tell me how wrong I am. And he never could figure out how to do that. So he sometimes straighten me out, send me in a different direction, but usually it was put in the form of, hey, why don't you try this instead? Okay, we'll give it a shot. So the Grambo story. Once upon a time, Haley was really little.
Not born.
Yeah, that's really little. Now, Mom, of course, said, I'm going to be Nana because I had a Nana, so I'm going to be Nana. All right, be Nana. Works for me. Well, Bert had absolutely no idea. He didn't want to be called Grandpa or Papa or Pappy or an Italian name for something or what the French call a certain I don't know what. So we're sitting there watching a movie, which I used to come over when I was down there on Friday nights, and we'd watch The Pretender, and then sometimes we'd watch a movie, and then all of a sudden, he jumps up and he's like, yes, I got it! I'm like, what's your problem? He's all, I will be known as Grambo. We were watching Rambo. So thus came Grambo. There you go. That's where Grambo came from. A lot of the stories that I heard trouble got to change over time. He was always Grambo to me from that day on. Calling him Dad never was right, you know, and he never expected everything else. We were just kind of buddies, but I didn't want to ever call him Bert either. And when Grambo came, he was always Grambo. So, you know, whenever I'd see him, it would be, oh, good day, Grambo. Throwing in Bob and Doug McKenzie. And he kind of warmly adopted that, although I don't think he quite ever understood it. And never understood why we used to have our finger gun wars. Which was that. No one ever does. It's been going on for 50 years. It won't quit. So to have the happy day, everyone says he said that always. It was not something he ever said really to me. It was always good day or we'll see you next time and have a good day. Anyways, as I said at his birthday years ago, thank you, Grambo, for always being the dad that you didn't have to be. Because he was always there for each and all of us. And I have all the wonderful people over here because of him. Most of which I don't see often due to logistics and time and mostly distance. Yeah, you come up and visit once. So I'm grateful for that. Everything else that came from Grandma being here, including and most importantly, keeping Mom happy and grounded for so many years. And it's tough to fill in for somebody that fills that void, knowing you never can, no matter how much you try. So I will simply leave it with how I always left him. Good day, Grambo.
Well, so Nathan was worried about being taken up there and getting killed. I'm just saying you never had to go meet Grandpa and say, can I have your daughter? So I got that privilege. going over, it was shortly after Bert and Carolyn were married, that they'd been dating.
It was 2 weeks. We got back from our honeymoon and you said, Andrea said, guess what? We're engaged. We're having a wedding. I said, oh, really? She said, you're planning it.
Was it 2 weeks? I thought it was at least a month or two.
It was several months for the marriage.
That's okay. He was pretty kind to me. He wasn't. I'm not so sure. He thought I was a son-in-law for his daughter, or whatever at the time. But I was grateful that he was really good to me. The best thing is you hear all these wonderful qualities about who he was. For me, I didn't know how to be married to his daughter. And I can tell you that the things that he taught her, and he truly was a special man in our lives. And I'm grateful because not only do I get to know Bert and Carolyn, but I got to know his daughter, and I have wonderful kids, and he actually has a great grandson. Unfortunately, Bert can never get to meet relax, so you can see him walking around here. But I'm just grateful. I want to say thanks to Bert and Carolyn for all they've done for our family and everything. And I'm truly blessed to be married to his daughter. Thank you.
Grandma was always just there, and he was always so supportive of everything that you did. He was always proud of you. He, I don't know, was just the best man ever, and I'm just so glad that he was in my life and Nana's life, and he just, he was always just so joyful, and you know, if we were ever feeling upset or anything, you know, he was always there. And you know, when we went to go get me a car, we were there in the heat, and he was just, you know, there, and he would let me sit in the front because I get car sick. So he was always such a gentleman. And when I went to help Nana pack, we were packing up some books and all of his stuff, and he just kept unpacking them and putting them back onto the shelf. So we had to, there was a couple times that we had to, you know, repack them, but I don't know, he was always so supportive, and I'm just so grateful to, you know, have, you know, been with him, and you know, through his last days, it was like he was just such a blessing, and it was so nice to be able to see him and say goodbye. Thank you.
As many of you know who know Bert, he was always into trying new things. And he and I would talk about different approaches. One time he was telling me that he had read that if you have more copper in your diet, your hair will grow. So I really was kind of surprised by that. So one day, he and Carolyn came over, and Jim took one look at him and he said, "Berto, you need to eat more pennies because it's not working." And with that, he would respond, "Okay, Jimmy dear," because we have a little joke going. We used to go to Chevy's every Friday night, Carolyn and Bert and me and Jimmy. And Jim used to order a quesadilla to the point where, after a while, they created one and called it the Jimmy Dia. It was half beef and half chicken. Anyway, he always referred to Jim as Jimmy Dia, and we will love him forever. He was the best guy, and he was so good to Carolyn. And all of our trips, he was always telling her how much he loved her, and he would call her Carolinia and tell her how much he loved her, and he was a very special friend. So when you think about growing more hair, think about more copper in your diet.
Good thing Jeff went last.
Okay, I probably forgot because this is going to be the hardest part to say. So earlier this year, when we lost Grambo, at the time, I was actually newly pregnant, and very excited, but very, very sick. And I ended up with a very serious condition. I almost lost my life. And in the process, we lost the baby. And it all happened at the same time. We lost Rambo maybe 10 days before the baby. And I remember, and one of the things that I just keep thinking about when I remember all of this, and it's, you know, the hardest thing I've ever gone through, so I think about it a lot. And one of the only things that brought me peace, and it still brings me peace, is that when I lost my baby, Rambo was there to bring them to the other side. I haven't lost many people in that way. I'm lucky, I suppose, but it gave me peace laying there in the hospital knowing that of all the people that could be there to help my little angel baby cross over, it was Rambo, because who else would you want to be there to welcome you home? So thanks for letting me come back up and say that, and just goes to show the kind of man he was, that I could lay there and just find peace knowing that he was the one there for my little one.
I just want to share something that Bert did and said to me that I'll hang on to forever. If you don't know, I've been a cop for 30 years.
29.
Sit down.
29 and 5/8. Pulled the plug a couple of years ago and got out of it. And the last, I don't know, at least a few years, but probably much longer than that. But I just remember him reinforcing it in the last few years or so. He sat down, and every once in a while you see crap on the news. You know, they blame the cops for everybody else. They didn't fix this person's life that his family has screwed up for 40 years already, that kind of stuff. But he said to me that I was the ideal police officer, that's what everybody needs to be. If every cop was the way I was, the world would be a much better place. And he never actually saw me work. He didn't do any ride-alongs with me, but he heard some stories, and I don't know, maybe he just judged by my personality, so I fooled him real well. But that just, it kind of set it aside and went, yeah, whatever. But later I thought about it. It means a lot to have someone say you would be the cream of the crop of an entire profession. So that's something I'll hold on to. And then something else, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just to point out that sometimes people are not memorable, and sometimes people are memorable. And I have an example of Bert being very memorable, along with being a small world. And my wife Janelle was also in law enforcement, was a 911 dispatcher, and one of the people that she worked with is Don, who's hiding behind the pole over there. So he was a cop too, and he recently retired. And that was back in the state whose name shall not be spoken.
Baltimore?
Yeah, Baltimore.
Yes,
That
the
would have been
state
worse.
of Baltimore. Anyway, last year for the 4th of July? Yeah, 4th of July, we had a barbecue, invited a whole bunch of people, and Don and his wife had just moved up to Idaho at that time, so we invited them. And Don got there, and I don't know if it was the voice he heard, because it's hard to forget his name. But he immediately, his eyes bugged out, and he went, Bert Frescura? And here we are in another state, 40 years later maybe? 40 years later, and Don said, I used to work with you at HP. And I think you were in the mail room. He was in the mail room. So he delivered his mail, but he remembered Bert 40 years later and a couple states away. And that's just, I just thought that was kind of cool. So that's why Don is here today. to remember him as well. So anyway, Bert is definitely a memorable guy, and I mean that in a good, not a bad way. All right, last chance. Anyone else? Otherwise, we're gonna our drinks that are probably warm now to do the toast. Did you have an official toast you wanted to do?
She's been drinking it.
Drinking it.
Good for
Did
you.
you want to do the toast? I thought it was-
Would you like to do the toast?
Well, I don't know what to say other than here's the Bert.
Whatever.
I can. All right, I can wing it. All right, if you have your either Martinelli's or champagne or whatever, refill her. Did you start saying something?
The reason we have Prosecco is because the Italian man loves Prosecco. Prosecco is basically sparkling water or wine because you can't call it champagne because it's not from France. Like he loves Prosecco. It's the Italian thing.
Well, you can't call champagne from France champagne unless it's from Champagne in France.
Right.
So not just.
Okay.
Prosecco is better because it's easy.
She knows about being easy.
Yeah.
I know you don't. You don't know anything about being easy. Trust me.
No. Thank you.
Am I winging it or are you doing it? Or I guess I'm going to try to wing it. All right.
Okay.
Bert Frescura, Bert, brother, grandpa, dad, uncle, husband,
Lover.
friend.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Remember to somebody. Thank you for being you. Thank you for accepting all of us, loving all of us, being an example to all of us. And we hope that you continue to watch over us, and listen to us, and give us that comfort wherever we need it. To Bert. All right, get the Kleenex and eat some food and drink some stuff.